In 2032 in the eastern United States, Flynn checks on her brother Burton, who lives in a trailer outside the house. Burton is playing a game on his VR set and explains he has a big competition tonight that will give them enough money for their mom's medicine. Then he hands Flynn his headset so she can win the level for him. In the game, Flynn takes over her brother's avatar and immediately guides the rest of the party into fighting back with a better strategy, winning the level in just a few seconds. Then she checks the body of an opponent and discovers the important map the party had been looking for. Afterward, Flynn goes to her job at the 3D print shop. Burton's friends come by to drop a box for Burton, which contains a new kind of headset sent by a Colombian company called Milagros Calderon. The cost is absolutely free, but Flynn has to scan her eye as the equivalent of a signature to confirm she got the box. Later at home, Burton explains that he was asked to beta test this new headset since he crossed level 100 on another game. However, it had been Flynn who did that for him, and since this gig will pay well, Flynn agrees to do it. Burton puts the headset on her, and when Flynn opens her eyes, she finds herself in Burton's avatar riding a motorbike. As she explores the city, Flynn is amazed by the fact she can feel everything. Suddenly a computer voice in her head welcomes her to the game and warns her she'll also be able to feel pain. Flynn must do whatever the voice says to earn her keep. The voice gives her directions until she makes it to Buckingham Palace, where the bike disappears as soon as she gets off. When she says the words "I've arrived," the door opens and servants appear in front of her, asking her name. After saying a code name, Flynn goes into another room and does some tricks to test the game. Afterward, she goes to the garden, where a company known as Research Institute or RI is hosting a party. The voice tells Flynn to flirt with Mariel and convince her to take her avatar home. When Flynn starts talking to Mariel, the woman pauses the game for some privacy, and she's quickly charmed by Flynn's words. They leave in Mariel's car and they start kissing while a robot servant drives. Suddenly the voice says Flynn must take the glass vial from Mariel's pocket and open it under her nose. Flynn does so and Mariel passes out, causing the driver to attack. The robot uses kicks and fists before taking out a knife, but Flynn fights back, hitting the driver a few times before reaching the brakes to make the car stop. At the same time, she uses the knife to kill the driver. Then the voice makes Flynn take the car to a closed alley, where she says, "I've arrived," to make the wall open and meet Aelita, the person behind the voice. After some cryptic comments, Aelita announces they'll continue tomorrow. At that moment, Flynn disconnects the game and Burton tells her the company loves her and even offers more money. Flynn agrees to come back tomorrow, but when she stands up, she feels a bit dizzy. Afterward, Flynn goes to a bar to buy her mom's medicine from dealers. The guys say she doesn't have enough for even one pill and imply she should offer naughty services, only to be interrupted by Connor, a disabled man who attaches his monowheel to a small vehicle. Connor threatens the dealers until they agree to sell Flynn the medicine. Then he and Flynn leave while the guys go back into the bar. Their boss Corbell scolds them for being afraid of a disabled man and smashes a guy's head on the table as punishment. Sometime later, Flynn connects to the game again. The avatar wakes up in a surgery room, unable to move. Aelita tells her that Flynn can't leave the sim without her permission before the surgeons begin removing the avatar's eyeball to replace it with Mariel's. Flynn can feel the pain, but Aelita guides her through it until she falls asleep. Later, the avatar wakes up in a car with Aelita and they go to a fancy building where they use Mariel's eye to open the door. They get in an elevator that takes them through a bunch of curious floors, including one with a whale. Eventually they reach a chamber with an inverted pyramid hanging from the ceiling. Aelita makes Flynn put her own eye on the pyramid, and when the avatar jerks back in pain, Aelita forces her to keep the head there so the laser can finish its job. Suddenly Daniel shows up and Aelita tells Flynn to stop him because he's there to kill them. However, Daniel immediately overpowers Flynn and ties her up before using a gun that shoots sonic punches to knock down Aelita. While Daniel starts hurting Aelita to make her give up information, Flynn manages to get a hand out, only to discover the skin has peeled off and there's a robot underneath. Daniel lets go of Aelita to shoot again and Flynn sends the avatar to fight him, giving Aelita time to run away. Putting his attention on her allows Daniel to shoot the avatar in the head and Flynn wakes up in the real world, saying she never wants to play again as she throws up. Out of town, a policeman notices two suspicious cars and follows them, but they suddenly disappear. When the cop comes out to investigate, a man pulls a gun on him and tells him to stand in the middle of the road. Then an invisible car knocks the cop down. It turns both cars have advanced cloaking. The next day at work, Flynn gets a call from Wilf, who tries to warn her about some impending danger and advises her to play again, but Flynn just hangs up. In the evening, Flynn is closing the shop when the lights flicker and Wilf's voice is heard through all the machines around her. He claims her life is in danger and there is a bounty of $9 million on her head, but he can't help her unless she signs in. Terrified, Flynn runs to find Burton, who is hanging out with his friends. When they check the area with their drone, they see a group of armed people coming towards them. Flynn rushes to hide her blind mother Ella in the basement while Burton's friends hack into the assassin's drone to make it look like the boys are still sitting around the fire. Then Burton and his friends link their body implants to their drone, gaining the ability to see its visual feed. After grabbing their guns, the group sneaks into the woods and begins taking the men down one by one pretty easily thanks to their hack. The enemy tries to shoot back, but they can't do anything against the guy's implants that allow them to find them in the dark. Meanwhile in the house, the power goes out and a man comes after Flynn, who activates the Roomba to distract the guy and hit him from behind. The man immediately turns around and tries to shoot her, but he's killed first by Burton, who shoots through the window. Thinking it's over, the group checks the drone camera and discovers the enemy has hacked them back so they could secretly bring over a backup team. Another gunfight ensues and Burton's group is starting to run low on ammo, but at that moment Connor arrives and helps them out. Once every enemy is dead, the group agrees that Flynn must use the headset again to gather information. She logs in and wakes up in a body that looks exactly like her. Then Wolf approaches her and explains this isn't a game. The headset sends her mind to a robot called Peripheral in the year 2099. When she leaves the building, she's shocked to see giant statues decorating London but almost no people around. Wolf also shows her a newspaper with Ella's obituary, 4 weeks from that day in Flynn's timeline. The deal Wolf offers is simple. If Flynn helps him find Aelita, then he'll pay for the medicine to save her mother. After Wolf disconnects her, Flynn appears in the present feeling dizzy again, but she still rushes into town to pick up the medicine where Wolf left it. Then she gives Ella the medicine while Burton's friends bury all the bodies. Next she logs in again and wakes up in a house in Notting Hill, where Wolf introduces her to his boss Lev and his technicians. Flynn learns that whenever they come in contact with the past branches off to create a parallel timeline known as a stub, and the contact becomes the point of separation. Aelita was providing them with a connection to the stub, which they'll lose if they don't find her soon. Flynn is upset to hear the medicine only has a 57% rate of success, so she announces that she'll only help them find Aelita after they help her family for real. Meanwhile, Officer Tommy stops by the road when he sees a cup of coffee floating in midair. He pokes around and eventually realizes there's a car with some sort of cloaking device. After lots of touching, he makes the car visible and finds a bullet, which he bags up and takes to Burton because Tommy knows about his expertise. Burton identifies the type of bullet but claims to know nothing. Moments later, Flynn comes back and tells Burton that the people from the future are going to send them $250,000 by making their cousin Leon win the lottery. Afterward, Flynn tries to search the internet for references to Milagros Calderon or Wolf but comes up empty. While doing so, her hand gets stuck on the computer mouse and she's unable to move it, so she has to use her other hand to pry it off. Later in the middle of the night, Flynn wakes up when she hears a strange noise. She goes downstairs and discovers it's Ella, who announces her eyesight is coming back. Meanwhile, Corbell is using a VR set to hire virtual women, only to suddenly be interrupted by Daniel, who offers him $10 million to get rid of Flynn and Burton. Corbell thinks it's a joke and leaves the game. Later, while Corbell is with a real woman, he gets a message saying that he has received $2.5 million in his bank account. Now knowing the offer was real, he agrees to kill Flynn and her family. The next day, Flynn goes to work and finds Burton and his friends printing more weapons. It turns out Burton has used the lottery money to buy the shop. Afterward, Flynn logs in to visit the future. She tells Lev's group everything that happened with Aelita, and they explain that Mariel was an assistant security manager at the RI. They also tell her that Corbell has been hired to harm them, so Flynn asks to be sent back to the present to warn her brother. In the meantime, Wolf parks outside his childhood home and remembers the day he and Aelita were adopted. When he finally goes inside, he hears Aelita singing, but it's only a robot with her face and voice. Then he meets his mother, who tells him she last saw Aelita a month ago in St. James. Aelita had said that she was staying where snow last fell in London. In the present, Burton meets Corbell and reveals he knows about his mission. He offers Corbell two choices, one of which is $200,000 every week to leave them alone. When Corbell asks about the other, Burton explains he and his friends are former Marines who are all connected as one big organism thanks to their military implants. If Corbell tries anything, he'll learn how deadly they can be. Corbell isn't scared because he's killed many criminals in the past just to control his town, so Burton points at the glass in Corbell's hand and a bullet immediately shatters it. Finally, taking it seriously, Corbell shakes hands with Burton to accept the money deal, unaware that Tommy is watching nearby. Later, Flynn logs in again and appears in a car with Wolf. They drive around Buckingham Palace, trying to retrace Flynn's steps from that night. They decide to walk around and Wolf links them up so they have access to each other's sensory experience, which can be controlled by moving their fingers. Now Flynn can see and hear everything Wolf can, including his hangover. Soon a police robot begins following Flynn and Wolf realizes that her robotic body isn't properly registered. Wolf tells the cop that Flynn's robot is being used by a woman from Canada who is desperate to see her long-distance lover. Then he kisses Flynn to prove the story. The cop believes it but makes Flynn log out. Meanwhile, Daniel's boss and head of the RI, Charisse, invites company's researcher Grace to her garden, where she keeps tons of bees. While they share some tea, Charisse asks about Aelita, and Grace admits she told her about the Stubb research department. Then Charisse reveals there was a chemical in the tea that makes her sweat mimic a pheromone released by hornets and opens the door so the bees can attack Grace as punishment. The next time Flynn logs in, Wolf tells her about the clue he's obtained. Flynn thinks Snow could be a person, and Wolf realizes it was one of Aelita's heroes. They visit the place where the celebrity died and Flynn opens the wall like Aelita taught her, allowing them to find Aelita's apartment. The place is a complete mess, meaning someone got there before them. Then Flynn notices a broken clock that looks exactly like the one in her house, so she moves the hands to make the times match. A secret door opens and they find the surgery room where Flynn had her eye replaced. There are 2 broken down robots plus a white model of her own house and its surrounding area, including figurines of her brother and friends. After taking a sample from the robots, Wilf finds Aelita's implant in a box, which she got removed so she couldn't be traced. When they're about to leave, the main door suddenly blasts open. Soon Daniel and a robot attack them, and Daniel's sonic gun seems to affect Flynn's real body too. Wilf uses a fallen scalpel to attack the robot and knock it down, which distracts Daniel and allows Flynn to disarm him. Unaware that Charisse is seeing everything through the robot's eyes, Flynn begins shooting Daniel to make him talk and he explains Charisse is after her because she took something. Before he can say anything more, Charisse makes the robot kill Daniel. In return, Flynn destroys the robot with the gun. Then a flashback reveals that in 2075, London is absolutely destroyed and Wilf and Aelita are kids living on the streets. One day they see a van distributing food, so Wilf goes to investigate while ignoring Aelita's warnings. When he comes closer, the van starts looking blurry, so he throws a stone and discovers the whole thing is just a visual projection. Suddenly 2 people in yellow suits and masks chase after Wilf and Aelita, quickly capturing them both. Back in 2099, Wilf takes the samples and the implant to Lev, who points out that Aelita won't survive long without it. Flynn returns to her time and notices blood in her eye. Suddenly her right hand spasms again and when she looks back up, the blood is gone. Later Flynn and Burton argue over how they're handling the situation and as Flynn gets more agitated, a bruise grows over her left eye and she suddenly falls into a seizure. Burton takes her to see a doctor, who says Flynn had a tonic-clonic seizure but there don't seem to be any after effects. She still wants to run some more scans and advises Flynn to stay away from the headset. When they return home, Burton tells his friends he wants to log in and put those people back in line to ensure they don't hurt Flynn. Connor seems interested in the idea of being able to control a body. In the future, Charisse has her people make a robot in the image of Daniel so he can share information about Wilf and Lev. Moments later Charisse shows up at Lev's house and accuses him of stealing something. When Lev plays ignorant, Charisse talks about the structure of their world and its 3 major forces, the kleptoligarchy that Lev belongs to, the Met Police, and the Research Institute. Charisse reminds Lev that each group shouldn't overstep its bounds and points out the last guy that tried met a traffic fate. She threatens Lev with the same fate and after she leaves, Lev notices his teacup is gone. At that moment Connor logs into the Flynn robot and tries to run away by jumping through a window, but a technician immediately cancels the connection. Meanwhile Flynn is watching childhood home movies on a normal headset when Wilf appears to tell her what Connor did. Then Flynn reveals she looked into Lev and found the name in her timeline connected to a mafia-related man whose entire family was brutally killed, but Wilf says there is no connection. Afterward Wilf tells Lev what Flynn found out about his family. Lev isn't surprised and explains that he hired Aelita because he wanted a stub of his own so it could be used for many goals like testing new medicine. Lev reveals that he was troubled by the idea of other versions of himself so he had his family killed in the other stubs. Back to Flynn, her hand continues to spasm but decides to log in again anyway. She tries to go exploring, and when the technicians try to disconnect her, Burton's friends hack into the headset to stop them. Flynn wants bodies for Burton and Connor too and demands to know why there are such fewer people in the future. After both teams cause Flynn to connect and disconnect a few times, Flynn manages to stay in the future and convince the technicians to cooperate. Moments later, Flynn meets Wilf at a graveyard, where she sees mysterious objects floating over some of the graves. Wilf explains the objects show the different phases of something called the jackpot, which was a funny name given to the apocalypse. The first one opens up to show a complete electrical blackout in 2039 that started in the USA and soon spread worldwide. The second object shows a pandemic called the Blood Plague, and the third shows a total environmental catastrophe in which 7 billion people died over 4 decades. The fourth one is called the End and it shows a domestic terror attack in which a nuclear missile silo was blown up. The visual illusion of the explosion is too much for Flynn to handle and she asks it to stop, so she's sent back to the present. A flashback then shows how Aelita convinces Grace to share her research by appealing to their former relationship. Grace takes Aelita to the room with the pyramid, calling it the God Font. Here they have access to stubs used for their research in various fields. One of their studies belongs to the behavioral mod department, in which they set up a shell company in the stub that made a deal with the military, giving them implants for their soldiers. Those implants were then tweaked to affect the brain's compassion center. For example, they cause soldiers to shoot random wounded animals by making them see as the enemy. Only one soldier tries to help an injured dog and gets blown up in the process. Aelita is disgusted by human experimentation without consent, but Grace doesn't seem to mind. On their way out, they're seen by Mariel. In the present, former assassin Robert is trying to live a normal life under a new identity until he receives a package with a phone and a sonic gun inside. He tests the gun and is shocked by its power. At that moment he gets a call from the Daniel robot, who offers $10 million to kill Flynn's family. Robert tries to decline, but Daniel forces him to accept when he threatens his daughter. Later, a bowling alley, Robert goes to see an old friend, accusing him of revealing his identity to Daniel. The guy explains he was threatened until he gave up the information, but a furious Robert still shoots him and all his sons to death. Then Robert gets in his car and Daniel sends him the information to find Flynn. Suddenly a surviving son comes out and opens fire on Daniel, who immediately rushes out of the car to hide under it. He shoots the guy a couple of times with the sonic gun and then runs him over with his car. In the morning, Flynn gets more tests done and the doctor tells her some bacteria is affecting the part of her brain related to seeing. Then she uses a spinal tap to take some fluid from Flynn's body to study it further. Meanwhile, Robert stops his car by the road and pretends it isn't working as he waits for Flynn to leave the clinic. However, Flynn's friend Billy finds him first and insists on helping even when Robert says no. At that moment, Burton and Flynn pass by in their car and stop when they see Billy, offering their help as well. Robert grabs the sonic gun and Flynn recognizes it, so she makes Burton duck right before they get shot. Then Robert tries to shoot Flynn, so Burton speeds up to escape and ends up crashing nearby. As Robert comes closer with open fire, Burton comes out and shoots back while Flynn makes the car go back to get Robert out of the way. Robert is soon ready to shoot again, however Billy has her own weapon and brings him down first, overpowering him but not killing him because he's wearing a bulletproof vest. Minutes later, Tommy arrives and arrests Robert. He also asks Flynn about the sonic gun, but she pretends to know nothing. On the way to the police station, Robert tells Tommy about the deal he was offered and explains that those who hired him will want to cut loose ends, so he offers the money to Tommy to let him escape. Before Tommy can respond, an invisible force hits the car, making it roll over. Another car becomes visible nearby and the driver drags Robert away. By the time Tommy comes out, the mystery person is gone. Later, Flynn logs in and goes to see Charisse at the RI. Flynn asks why Charisse is after her and Charisse says she stole something, but Flynn swears she doesn't have anything. When Flynn threatens to kill her, Charisse reveals she's also using a robot body and attacks first. A fight ensues and both robots show remarkable strength, but Flynn still manages to overpower Charisse and break her neck before leaving. Another flashback shows Burton and his team in the Texas outback in 2028. While on duty, they discover a dog stuck in a wired fence howling for help. They discuss whether or not to help it, and Burton reminds the others of the intel about the enemy using injured animals. The team isn't convinced and Connor runs out to help the dog anyway. As he cuts the wires, he sees that the dog is armed with a bomb, which blows up and takes most of his limbs. At that moment, Connor wakes up in the present, screaming at the memory haunting his dreams. Meanwhile, Tommy tries to keep investigating the accident but finds the digital files blocked. Then the sheriff tells him to take paid leave and get some rest. After the sheriff leaves, Tommy sees in a bathroom stall a pair of shoes that look like the ones he saw at the site of the accident. This makes him realize the sheriff is dirty and getting Tommy out of the way on purpose. In the future, Wilf and Flynn are on a busy street and Flynn wonders why the people seem to stay away from them, so Wilf explains it's just a visual illusion created by the RI to make the city look less bleak. Flynn moves her fingers the way Wilf shows her and all the people disappear, so she tries it on the landscape next. Tons of buildings disappear and the remaining ones look destroyed. Afterward, Wilf and Flynn go to meet the fabricators behind Ileeta's robots, whose location Wilf discovered thanks to the samples he took the other day. They enter a butcher's shop and say the code word, but the butchers refuse to offer their real services. Then Flynn makes up a story about how she bet her body's maker that she could find a better fabricator, causing the butcher to rise to the challenge. He inspects Flynn's robot and says he can do it, offering her retractable titanium nails. Flynn then asks about replacing a robot eye with a human eye, which causes the butchers to attack. For an advanced body like Flynn's, it's no trouble to fight them at the same time, and with just a few movements, she knocks them both down. One of the butchers still tries to attack again, but Flynn overpowers her again and the other butcher tells her to surrender. Next, Wilf shows them a picture of Ileeta and asks about her, so the guy says she had been working with a group of revolutionaries called the Neoprims. Wilf is shocked that his sister could hide that from him. In the meantime, Lev's technicians build robots for Connor and Burton to come to the future too. In the present, Corbell and his wife are setting up dinner while an unconscious Robert sits across the table. When he wakes up, he discovers he has a metal collar around his neck. He immediately tries to attack Corbell, but the wife uses a remote to give him an electric shock through the collar. Later that night, Leon learns that Connor has been suffering from nightmares and offers to share his pain. Using the implants, they connect to each other and Leon sees Connor's memories of how he lost his limbs. The experience leaves him shaking on the floor from the pain, but at least now Connor is peacefully asleep. In the future, the technicians realize that Flynn's doctor is researching the bacteria she found in her body. At that moment they get a visit from Inspector Ainsley, who is investigating Daniel's death. Lev can't call his solicitors because the phones are down, so they're forced to invite her in. Ainsley explains she can just arrest Will for his presence at Daniel's murder site and execute him in the next 7 minutes, but instead they can just answer her questions. Back to the present, the sheriff shows Corbell the video from Tommy's car. Meanwhile in Corbell's house, Robert steals a heavy paperweight while the wife is looking away. Then he pretends to be interested in Corbell's fish tank and comes closer to smash it with the paperweight, causing water to flood the room and make the wife fall to the floor. Furious, she uses the remote to electrocute him, but he grabs her leg and the water conducts the electricity to make them both pass out at the same time. A few seconds later, Robert's eyes open. Sometime later, Connor and the siblings get a message from the future asking them to log in. When they wake up, they find Ainsley waiting for them. Lev has told her about the connection to the past, so she wants to take them to the station for some tests. Eventually they make it to a Met Police training facility called the Zoo. With a flick of Ainsley's hand, the debris in front of them turns into a tall building and Ainsley sends Burton and Connor inside so they can test their new bodies. Ainsley's assistant Beatrice explains the rules. They must advance from floor to floor while getting rid of all obstacles until they reach the roof where a surprise awaits. The lights go out and 6 robot guards appear around them. The guys work together like the old times and quickly bring the guards down while Beatrice analyzes their data. Once they're done, she announces each floor will have more and more enemies. However, the guys keep advancing through the floors with no problems, beating up any enemy that gets in their way. When they make it to the roof, Beatrice informs them the 3 of them must fight until there's only one left standing. Burton and Connor immediately attack, but not even their teamwork is enough to defeat Beatrice, who only needs a few moves to force them to disconnect. Outside, Ainsley tells Flynn she's investigated her family in this timeline and shares the result. The local version of Connor didn't lose his limbs, and none of the team members had the implants, so Burton didn't survive the war. All this means that the RI opened the stub at least a decade before what they'd been assuming. The jackpot seems accelerated in Flynn's timeline and Ainsley suspects the RI. When their conversation is over, Ainsley disconnects Flynn. In the present, Tommy returns to the station and asks to see the evidence he brought from the accident, but the only thing on the list is his wrecked car. Suspicious, Tommy tracks down his car in a junkyard and finds all the other evidence inside, like the sonic gun. When he presses the button, he accidentally shoots the windows off. At that moment he gets a call from the sheriff telling him to go to Corbell's place. When Tommy arrives, he follows bloody footprints to find the wife's body and the sheriff talking to Corbell. The sheriff knows Robert did this, but he wants Tommy to arrest Burton and his team as the culprits. Tommy refuses, so the sheriff tells him to wake up to the reality of the corruption in the force and to do as he says, otherwise he'll get fired or even arrested. Tommy returns to his car and while thinking over what to do, he remembers the guns and takes them back to the house. The sheriff tries to make him see reason, but Tommy shoots him a bunch of times to kill him, then he hits Corbell with the sonic gun to throw him out the window. Meanwhile Ella is suddenly blind again and asks for help, so Burton's friend Reese takes her to the clinic. Nearby, Robert watches them and starts following them. Later at the clinic, the doctor checks on Ella while Reese waits at the reception. Robert comes in with a bleeding arm and when Reese tries to help him, Robert stabs him a few times. Reese starts defending himself and a fight ensues, but no matter how many times Robert stabs, Reese keeps going. Eventually Robert manages to keep him in a hold and choke him until Reese dies. When the doctor and Ella come to check on the noise, Robert threatens them with a gun to keep them as hostages. Then he takes Reese's phone and unlocks it with his dead face to send a message. When Connor and the siblings return to the present, they get a message from Reese's phone saying he's at the clinic with Ella. Burton, Flynn, and Leon immediately get in the car and on the way to the clinic, they start getting suspicious of the messages because they use words Reese wouldn't use. Leon tries to connect with Reese through their implants, but he can't find Reese's vitals so they guess a killer is there. Once they're close enough to the clinic, Leon connects to Reese's body and makes it twitch. When Robert stands up to shoot Reese again, the team sees him move with thermal binoculars and Burton immediately shoots him down. Then they rush inside to save the women and Burton shoots Robert again just in case. In the future, Lev's technicians discuss how to access the bacteria in Flynn's brain to steal it. When Lev comes by, they use an encrypted language to keep discussing a possible plan, but Lev knows that language and threatens to kill them if they don't share what they know. They explain that Ilita planned to download the stolen RI files into Burton's implants to hide them in the past so they'd be untraceable. But since Flynn posed as him, the headset transformed the data into bacteria that began to colonize her brain. The technicians plan to give the data to the Neoprim so they can burn this world down and build a new one, but Lev cuts the guy's cheek and orders them not to betray him again if they don't want deadly consequences. The next time Flynn, Burton, and Connor log in, Ainsley offers them a deal. She can give them resources to prevent the jackpot in their timeline, and in return they must work for her. Flynn says she also wants a cure for her mother, but Ainsley informs her that nothing can be for Ella anymore and she'll die in 23 days. Upset, the siblings immediately disconnect and comfort each other. In the meantime, Charisse meets with one of the technicians, who tells her that the RI's data is in Flynn's head and wants Charisse to stop Lev from getting it. Charisse says she'll accelerate the jackpot in Flynn's timeline to get rid of her and her family. Later Flynn logs in to meet with Wilf, who wants to tell her something but worries Ainsley may be spying on them. They link up their minds and as they say each other's names they realize they love each other. Then they decide to visit the place where Wilf used to hide with Aelita when they were kids, unaware that the technicians are spying on them. When they make it to the spot, they make the extra people disappear and find a younger Aelita robot waiting for them. She tells Flynn to go away because her robot can be used by others, and once Flynn disconnects, the technicians lose contact. Then the real Aelita shows up to explain to Wilf that the immunity implant every citizen has in their heads is used to suppress memories. When Aelita removed hers, she remembered everything. While younger Aelita digs out a skull from the ground, adult Aelita says that the oligarchy killed 5 million people in under a fortnight because of the fear of spreading contagion, including Wilf's and Aelita's families. At that moment a bunch of people show up and Aelita reveals she's been gathering survivors to form the neoprims. Now all they need is the data in Flynn's head. In the present, Tommy tells Flynn about a warning from Homeland Security about an attack on a nearby missile silo. Recognizing the beginning of the jackpot, Flynn logs in and meets with a technician, forcing her to confess everything. Determined to stop the plan, Flynn asks Connor to log in too so he can help her open a new stub and cause a reboot, meaning Flynn is planning to self-delete so the enemy won't have a reason to accelerate the jackpot. Afterward Flynn meets Ainsley, who can't open a new stub but tells her how to do it at one of the RI's ancillary sites. When Flynn gets there, a guard immediately tries to stop her, but Flynn quickly overpowers him and uses his eye to open the door. Inside the building she finds a pocket watch and when she grabs it, Charisse gets a notification, so she opens the wall to release more guards. Flynn quickly fights them all and defeats them in just a few minutes with the help of the room's furniture. Then she puts the watch on a special panel and activates the stub portal. After telling Charisse she'll never find her, Flynn crushes the watch. Soon Flynn wakes up in the present and goes for a walk to the creek. Connor is hiding in the bushes with a sniper rifle, and after Flynn counts back from 10, a gunshot echoes through the air. Seconds later Flynn wakes up in her robot in the future and Ainsley asks if they should get to work. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.